Dave and Dave. A podcast in your face.
Welcome, everybody. This is Dave.
And Dave.
A podcast in your face where we talk about things that are going on in the world, pop culture stuff, you know. And if you like any of that stuff, you can check out Graphic Audio to learn more at graphicaudio.net. Anyway, today we're talking about post-apocalyptic stuff.
We are talking about post-apocalyptic. I already messed it up.
Post-apocalyptic stuff, yeah. You said you wanted to tease the giveaway, so however you want to phrase that.
If you're interested in Deathlands or you just want a free t-shirt, keep listening. We'll drop the secret word somewhere in this podcast, and you can pick up any piece of Deathlands swag from the Graphic Audio store. I think we got mugs. I think we got hoodies. We got t-shirts, and you can pick anything.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
Just comment on YouTube or reply to us at Graphic Audio on Instagram or Twitter with the secret word, and we'll get in touch and we'll send you some free stuff.
But yeah, stuff like Walking Dead has been going on forever. They're gonna end it at least in the main storyline, but they have like several spin-offs. And we're gonna talk about just why do people like post-apocalyptic things, whether it has to do with zombies eating their brains or not. Now, what is a Deathlands?
What is a Deathlands?
Mm-hmm.
Deathlands is a post-apocalyptic series, been around since before I was born, and it is still going. Features the Companions, a scrappy crew that, sort of roams the continental U.S., and so sometimes they have international adventures as well.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
The Companions go to France? And then,
you guessed it. They did go to France.
Oh, you're me, because that's what like all these shows like Friends or anywhere when a show just is running out of ideas, they'll go to France or space. Like they send the Leprechaun or Jason and Freddy. They'll go to space too, or to France. I don't know if that's happened, but that's so funny.
No, I think it was probably the fifth or sixth one that I did. They went to France and had to fight a bunch of cannibals or some other mutant.
Louis brains. How do you say brains in French? I'm pretty sure that's how you do it. I don't know. But that's funny. And you just mentioning the Companions. Let's talk about why do people like post-apocalyptic stuff? There's a multitude of reasons that I think, or theories that I have. But one is, as you mentioned, the Companions. I feel like it's similar with The Walking Dead or most post-apocalyptic series. People from different walks of life come together and like make a pseudo family or like a stand-in. They just meet each other, and it is something about like friends forming bonds in this horrible situation, which brings them together. And I don't know, you just want to hang out with them. I think that's a big part of it.
Hang out with them and fight for your life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to be around with Rick and the gang. Who's Terrence play?
He plays a couple of characters. He plays JB and Doc.
That is Terrence Hazelford. He's great. But yeah, I want to hang out with Doc while he shoots his whatever particular rifle he shoots.
I heard it's the new experience coming up. I probably can't say Disneyland. It's the new ride. You hang out with Doc and shoot muties.
I just want to take him to Epcot, go to France, and see it, and have him tell me what everything means.
So for me, I don't know. It was always more I've always been into like backpacking, getting out into the woods, getting disconnected, and there was something about this idea of like boiling everything down to just this simple life. Now, bear in mind, you have to set aside like the constant fear of death, the lack of medicine, no running water. But if you forget all that stuff, it's like an extended camping trip.
Absolutely, just giving up our modern comforts because, I mean, we have this caveman lizard brain part of us that wants to worry about survival, and we live very creature comforted lives. So there is something about getting back to nature, going back to who we were and still are, by having to forage, hunt, and find shelter, basically survive, work to survive, which is something we had to do. And now, I mean, please God, no one take away Amazon Prime, but we have everything. We can have everything delivered to us. We have all sorts of, we have video games, for crying out loud, things like this. It's that pull to be, outside fending for yourself and getting back to just your roots. There's something interesting about that. But the danger, I think, is what separates it from like a backpacking adventure.
Yeah, definitely. There's also something about about the stories that's appealing. It appeals to you on some like basic human level of watching these people succeed and watching them solve like all of the problems that come with all of this and how they get around it. And usually in every post-apocalyptic story or movie that I've watched, it ends up showing you the dark side of human nature, right? Like there's always the people that are vying for control. There's these de facto governments, with the single crazy leader that's just ruthless and will kill you for speaking wrong, and all that kind of stuff. So I know you've done, you have your podcast on The Walking Dead, and you've done a lot of analysis there. But before we sort of get into more depth on those two things, what got you started? I think I like to talk about that. We did it with the football episode, and we can talk about it here. Like, what are your early memories of post-apocalyptic stuff? Why did you why did you start creating content around that series?
In general, we'll get into Walking Dead, but I think for all the things we've been talking about, the post-apocalyptic stuff is, as you were talking, it reminds me so much about medieval times and like, you deal with medieval fantasy. Medieval times was basically post-apocalyptic. If you want to take the, the example that the Roman Empire was, I was never there, and I would have probably been enslaved if I was there. But yeah, the Western civilization was at a more technologically advanced time prior to the Roman Empire falling, and then things devolve, which I think is the basis for most of post-apocalyptic stuff. And you get crazy kings, who can do whatever they want. You get people that are, either part of like a religious cult or bandits that live in the woods and want to kill you, stuff like that. So that's very appealing. But I got into Walking Dead because, everybody just wouldn't shut up about it. There's things that take over the zeitgeist or that penetrate pop culture to such an effect that, your parents are talking about it, or like people, people you see on the street are talking about it, things like that. And that's what it was like for Walking Dead. And some of that stuff, it's not great, but then you check it out and sometimes it works. And Walking Dead started off great, and it was very episodic. It had violence, but it had that struggle to survive stuff, and that I like the characters. Now it's a shadow of itself, and it just won't die. Just much like the zombies that are trying to eat your brain, you can't kill them; they just keep coming back.
A part of the appeal, I think, is they had such a, I don't know if relatable is the word, but the hero, was like you were always behind him. You wanted to see him succeed, and he just had this resolve that was appealing. Yeah,
but then they'd also take it too far, in which he was mad with power. I mean, he was the guy with the gun, and they didn't portray it that sophisticatedly, but still, he would get to the point where it was like my way or the highway, or else he would kill you. I mean, some people could say some of the things he did were justified, but it's that madman. He became like the governor, which was this evil guy who had a town or a settlement, and he was ruling with an iron fist and keeping his reanimated daughter in a closet, and just not letting go in the past. Just a madman. And that's what Rick Grimes turned into at times, but they'd always pull him back and make him more relatable. But going back to this whole thing relating it to Deathlands, it is like a boy band type of thing where there's so many different personalities that you relate to at least one of them. You might relate to, the naive optimism of Glenn when he was still around, rest in peace, or the coolness of was it Daryl, the guy from Boondock Saints? Yeah, so there's just all sorts of different characters. So you're right. It's that you relate to somebody, if not multiple people. So yeah, these characters, you want to hang out with them. Like I said, I want to go to Epcot with
with
Doc.
Doc. So it's interesting that you brought up, they sort of pushed Rick Grimes, the character, in that direction where he gets power hungry. And you mentioned some of the things that he does. And there's a difference there between Deathlands and The Walking Dead where, the main character, Ryan, like
totally different than Rick.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like if killing is necessary, he'll kill, and like it's justified no matter what. Like at the end of the day, they're just trying to stay alive, and if you get in their way or you cross them, then you die. And like there have been, episodes throughout the series where they try to bring a little bit more humanity or emotion to him, especially, and I don't want to release too many spoilers, but the arc that Richard Rowan did had a lot of that. I mean, we've sort of been exploring that in the past few episodes, but throughout the entire series, he was just ruthless, and he had to be, and it was part of the appeal for a lot of people. I think that he didn't care, like the stuff didn't affect him. And he was a good leader for that reason. Like in the Deathlands, you don't usually survive for long, and he's kept this ragtag group of companions alive. So it was an interesting contrast just between the two shows, where you have the one guy that's trying to hang on to his humanity, and then gets villainized or is viewed that way. Because I felt the same way, when Rick Grimes started to veer in that direction, he almost became unlikable, right? Yeah. And as a consumer of media, it almost feels like a betrayal. You're like, why did you take this character that I love so much and push him in this direction? But it's still it's a compelling story, right? Like, and people change. You're not always going to be that same person you were at the beginning of the apocalypse.
Right. And I feel like the difference, too, one of the bigger differences, there's the wartime president and then there's the peacetime president. And if you have a leader, so I'm not as familiar with the Deathlands. And how many entries do we have for the Deathlands right now? What are we at?
I'm working on 145 right now.
145 entries into Deathlands. So I've dipped my toe into it, and I've worked on a couple. But the difference between, I guess, Rick Grimes and Ryan, does Ryan ever get to a place where they're safe relatively and he has to stop worrying about survival and worrying about living or, shifting gears? I think, George R.R. Martin famously said, it's great that Aragon saved the kingdom of man, but what was his tax policy? Meaning, he's a great warrior, but keeping everything together or transitioning, does he ever do any of that to your knowledge in the parts?
Yeah, I mean, quite recently it came up in one of the books, and fairly often the companions find themselves in places where things seem to be okay. It seems like they could make a life there. Right. And then they find out those little quirks, like they find out the tax policy, and maybe that's not so appealing, or secretly mass amounts of people are being murdered like behind a door somewhere. Right. And then they have to flee. Right. And there are a couple of episodes where they touch on, I don't want to say mundane, but the aspects of life that you have to start to think about if you're staying in one place and trying to recreate a society. And personally, I find that kind of stuff interesting. It's not as much of the run and gun, killing mutants, killing the crazy guys, that you get in some of the other episodes. But that's part of the appeal to me, is the idea of these people trying to recreate society.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, you want to feel like it's moving towards something. You want hope. Obviously, you're going to the post-apocalyptic genre because you like the struggle, but you want to think that the struggle is leading towards something. So you want these companions, these friends, eventually to get to a better place. But they'll never can, or else the series dies. I mean, honestly, it's true. Like, and that was a formula that happened with The Walking Dead, where there would be safety and then it would fall apart for any number of reasons. And then it was back to survival and just making it to another day. So we'll see, we'll see how long they can keep it going. Has the Deathlands ever splintered off and had like alternate or tangential stories?
There's been a few since I've been working on them, and sometimes you'll get a lot of background for characters that are introduced in an episode and then later killed, or sometimes we'll see characters over arcs of 5 or 6. But it's funny that you bring it up, because we're actually going to be launching a spin-off series for Trader, a prolific character in the Deathlands universe, later this year.
Awesome.
Actually,
Yeah.
so.
That's very cool. And, like I said, that's the similar thing that they're doing with The Walking Dead. They're taking these characters and splintering them off and trying to keep the story going or create new stories.
What was the show they did? Because they had, fairly early on, like after the 6th season, they started a spinoff. Was it?
I think it was Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And I think I watched the first season of that, and it just didn't take me for whatever reason. I think it was the characters not likable enough, or it just didn't pull me in. But there's so many more. There's like, I don't know. There's so many more, and they're gonna crank more out. Supposedly, there's a Rick Grimes movie coming. I don't know if that's gonna be a made-for-TV movie. But yeah, they're not letting The Walking Dead die. And but you're right. I think it could work because people want to be in that world. It's the same reason they're going to keep making Star Wars movies. People want to explore and be in that world, even if the main characters aren't going to be involved. So
now, how do you feel about the crossover between science fiction and post-apocalyptic? Right. So in the same universe as Deathlands, there's also the Outlanders, which is set farther down the road, and they have some level of science and technology back, but it's still very much a broken world.
I think they're similar, not all, because you do have utopian, semi-utopian like visions of the future in science fiction, like Star Trek. It's very hopeful. Things where man has progressed where we're not fighting wars amongst ourselves, at least. And we're exploring, searching out for knowledge. And yes, yeah, we'll get into some horrible battles or whatever, but for the most part, we're getting better. But the majority of sci-fi, a lot of it has to do with it, like the technology is going to get better, but we're still going to be, the same, cavemen we are now, and we were, thousands of years ago. And I think that's, I like some of that, but I think it's one of these things where you have to introduce it tastefully, or it has to be there from the beginning in a story. Sometimes they'll just say, well, now there's time travel, or now, now we can go to another dimension. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a recurring theme, is that no matter what the circumstances, humans are going to human, right? And the same flaws are always there, and no matter how good it gets or how good you have it, there's always going to be the bad actor, right? Mm-hmm. There's always going to be the people that just revert to their basic human instincts and sort of bring everything crashing down.
Or our own, or like I said, even the companions, like they're human beings, like they're not perfect, so they're gonna have flaws that's are gonna resurface. So not only could it be externally the threat, but also something you can't get over, whether that's character flaw, some a smoking habit. I don't know.
Smoking habit. Looking at you, JB.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite post-apocalyptic movie?
Oh, God. I mean, it's hard to say favorite. I read The Road and I enjoyed the movie, but to call that your favorite is, it's depressing. What's my favorite fun one? Oh, there was one and I don't know the name of it. That's how much I like it. But there was a one where it's basically in England. There was a super spreader event, a horrible virus that killed the majority of whatever. I don't know if it's just a part of England, but they walled it off and they've contained it to just that country. And yes, they devolved, but people devolved in different ways. They had like the Mad Max like motorcycle people, and there was also a guy who took over an old English castle and he was ruling it as a king. So there was that medieval aspect of it all. Like it was like all my favorite things in one. And it's tearing me apart to figure out what the name of it was. But what was yours?
I don't know. I have a few. It depends on the category, right? Because you have the virus or like zombie post-apocalyptic ones. Like I like stuff like 28 Days Later. I mean,
Of course.
then you have stuff like I really liked Book of Eli. There's something about the character and the way the movie was done that I just find appealing.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I was looking back at some of the older ones and trying to think about what the first like instance of post-apocalyptic or what my introduction would have been, and we can't forget Planet of the Apes, right?
Of course, yeah. That's
I
one
mean,
of the
that's a
OGs.
classic.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting story. I mean that's something that to my knowledge, and I'm sure someone will show up in the comments being like, "Well, this movie did it too," but to my knowledge, there's not quite something that's been done like that. And then you have the stuff like Mad Max, where it's just all over the top, and there's flames shooting out of cars, and I'll never forget the guy playing the guitar all chained up there.
That's just fun. I mean, that's fun, but yeah, it's drastically different from Book of Eli. So I don't know. And then what you brought up made me think of the Time Machine. That have you ever read that or seen the movie?
Mm-mm. Not Hot Tub Time Machine, right?
No, I wish. No. And I can't remember the guy's name. Famous, like one of the first like sci-fi writers. But essentially, a gentleman builds a time machine, and I think goes into the future. And basically, we've devolved, and there's two class of beings. There's like the beautiful, innocent people that live on top, and then there's the people who had been forced to live underground. And they're like. They're basically in charge, and they herd the beautiful people like cattle. It is definitely the time. H.G. Wells, yeah, it's definitely the time machine. But that's an example of sci-fi and post-apocalyptica. I just made up that word. I guess I'm going to turn post-apocalyptic into a noun. I guess
I almost said post-apocalyptica when I was thinking about my first experience.
It seems right. But yeah, that's an example where you have the sci-fi element of time travel, but you also end up with like a traditional post-apocalyptic scenario where these people are, hunted by awful situations and trying to survive. I don't know.
All right, so I have my next question for you.
Okay.
What is the secret word?
The secret word is post-apocalyptica.
Post-apocalyptica. There you go. Post-apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to grab your free Deathlands swag, there you go. Leave us a comment on Instagram or Twitter. We'll reach out to you, and you can pick anything from the GA website.
Yeah, like some sweet Deathlands merch.
I'm gonna get me a mug. I need a Deathlands mug.
Yeah, you should.
I should have had one for this episode. I don't know what I'm thinking.
Or at least a beanie or something. I don't know.
All right, everybody. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this month. Thanks so much for listening. We have a lot of awesome shows lined up for you guys. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GraphicAudio. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to get the latest episodes. Remember, this month we're giving away a free piece of DL swag. Remember, all you have to do is leave a comment or mention at GraphicAudio on Twitter or Instagram with the secret word. Let us know what you liked about this month's episode. We'll be announcing the winner next month. And we'll be giving away tons of GA swag and books, so make sure you stay tuned. Last but not least, if you're new to GA, you can use the code GADAVE2 for 5% off your first purchase on top of any other current sales. That's a pretty good deal.
Wow, you can combine it. That's pretty great.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all we got. Thanks again for listening. Be well.
All right, thanks, guys.
Dang it, 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 dang it.